Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Practice Forward podcast. I'm your host, Owen Bush, and today we're joined by Pamela Smith, who's the CEO of Twine Architectural Studio. Nice to see you today, Pamela. How are you?
It's great to see you too. I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain. We got a fair number of interesting projects, on the boards, and looking forward, to moving through the new year, 2026.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So if you want me to give a little rundown, yeah.
Well, your work at Twine is mostly about working in hospitals. Is that right?
That's correct. So 98% of our work is in healthcare. We specialize here in the New York tri-state region. So almost all our projects are in close by out in Long Island, Manhattan, some work in New Jersey, and up in the outer boroughs. We've been doing this. When I started last year was my 25th year in business. I founded Twine Architectural Studio in 2000. And so I worked initially for a firm that specialized in healthcare. So I went out on my own. That was my client base, and I was able to continue with it. Yeah, it's been. Well,
so actually, allow me to introduce you, Pamela. So welcome. This is Practice Forward. It's a show about technology, tools, and ideas reshaping architecture. And today, Pamela Smith, who designs care spaces that work the way people heal, precise, calm, and rooted in place. At Twine Architectural Studio, Pamela leads teams that turn existing facilities into everyday wins, bringing a cardiac cath/EP suite and 8 inpatient beds back to Manhattan's Lower West Side, so care lives closer to home, shaping an 18,000 square foot I'm sorry, I'm so bad with these words. Otolaryngology Center, is that right?
It's otolaryngology. That's right.
Otolaryngology.
Yeah.
As an arrival to recovery experience, renewing pediatric infusion and bone marrow transplant services for durable joy, and rediagramming maternity so fewer babies ever leave travel hallways. Stewardship through precision without losing the neighborhood's voice. So, and we'll get right into this with Pam. And today our sponsor is Scandaplan. We're supported by Scandaplan, and they give architects site truth that you can trust, clear level of detail and level of accuracy, transparent quality assurance, and models that make approvals and phasing cleaner. No tool hype, just reliable geometry so you can protect your patients, your schedules, and your design intent. Scandaplan is the measure of excellence. So, Pamela, it seems like for you, it's we're going to talk about your origin and your values, and then we're going to talk about 3 case studies that you've worked on recently.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we'll talk about, how you think about projects and, how you're thinking about, the tools you're going to be using in the next 3 years of your practice.
Yeah, so sort of it's interesting. I know you had asked me a little earlier about, what any inspiration I had, I guess, as I was growing up. And it's, I grew up in a small town in Michigan. So there were no architects where I was from. It wasn't necessarily a profession that I was aware of. And I'm not, it's hard to sort of trace the origins back, but my dad had constructed his own house, and I, had spent a lot of time out there while he was laying the blocks for the foundation walls and putting up the, framing for the walls and the roof, and perhaps there was a little bit of an inspiration there. And when I took a drafting course in high school, which was really focused on mechanical drafting, gears and machine parts. I do believe that I had a bit of a mentor there in the teacher I had, because I think he saw, the potential, and we were able to focus on architecture the second semester. So that was sort of the impetus that I just went ahead. I made a decision at that point that I wanted to be an architect, and I went to school and got my degree and moved out here to New York City. So, I wanted to go someplace, they had a little more action, I guess, than where I came from. And teamed up, got hired by a firm that, like, as I said earlier, specialized in healthcare. So I was able to work my way up, a small firm. I got a chance to, participate in client interactions early on, very beneficial. Got to learn how to manage my own projects, and when the time came, when I was ready to go out, from on my own, I think I had a really good foundation to do so. And I also built a good client base on my own. And I was very fortunate and that they were willing to give me work, for me to start up my own firm. So very grateful about that process, that I was able to go through. Interestingly enough, when I did go out on my own, I wasn't really thinking about, building a practice specifically. I think I always thought it was a stepping stone. Maybe I would be able to get into some kind of a partnership. And I can't say that I didn't, actually, make a few attempts to do so, with others, but nothing really came through. It's sort of like an interesting concept of when you decide to partner with somebody, it really needs to be someone that you're compatible with, and I think that you're complementary. So a lot of people that I knew specialized as I did, in healthcare. So it was sort of difficult to justify, right? If I do this, and you do the same thing, it's not, there may not really be an opportunity there to go from.
How did you get into specializing in healthcare exactly?
Well, it was because of the firm that I had taken a job with. That was their specialty.
Yeah. All right. So you've pretty much been in this healthcare architecture game your whole career, pretty much.
That's correct. And, architecture, it's an interesting specialty because, number one, it's very code driven. Through the health codes and the Department of Health, need to prove the projects that you're doing. It makes it essential for the clients to be able to work with an architect who's familiar with that. You want to be able to, to get something through easily. The authorities having jurisdiction, which is the health department, you don't want any holdups, you don't want any objections. Sometimes it can be a challenge, but that's the benefit, of making us, pertinent for the type of work that we do, and necessary.
I mean, you guys really actually seem to be kind of like the doctors of architecture, in a way, because there's such a like a encyclopedic knowledge and depth that you need. It is like kind of a lifelong career in that you need to have the same kind of like depth of knowledge as a doctor or a lawyer or something like that to really be able to, go deep into this stuff, it seems.
On a certain level, that's true, but in different aspects, obviously. Everybody has a specialty, and that's not to say that an architect who doesn't specialize in another field would equally have to know, everything in order to produce a project that was successful, right, in that field as well. Right. But we get the opportunity of working with physicians, very knowledgeable, incredibly accomplished individuals. And
who are some of the other people outside of architecture that shaped you in terms of how you approach how you work on site and how you approach a site?
That was another interesting question you've given me that I had to really think about, because I thought so much of my life revolves around my profession, and my professional colleagues. To find inspiration outside, as I was saying, when I grew up, there was really nobody in the field that I would look at for inspiration. But the truth is, when you work with some of the people you do within the facilities, and not even their facility and construction, or engineering departments, you have the physicians and the clinicians. and you see what they do and the importance of what they do. And the work that you're doing in healthcare needs to address their needs, you know. So
Yeah,
you've got,
sure.
right, you've got the clinicians, the nurses, the physicians, the work that they're doing for the community and the patient, you know, population is so important. And I think it's really important to try to have like an understanding and empathy for that, because you're going to be designing for them, you're going to be designing for the patients, you're going to be designing for the families, and you're going to be designing for the public. And so I
Right.
think that a lot of people think there might not be a lot of pure design opportunities in healthcare, but I think you need to understand how to take all those challenges and really embrace them, because
Hmm.
it's going to help, you know, it's going to help define your solution to those, you know, to those issues. So I think a lot of my inspiration comes from the people, you know, in the healthcare industry, only because that's my particular specialties.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, are there any, like, let's say artists or musicians or writers or anything like that that you feel like has been, do you hold as some kind of a, a North Star for you?
Yeah, I don't know as a North Star, but art and music is very important, you know, to
Yeah.
me too, because a lot of the creativity, you know, has similar, you know, roots. Architecture has similar roots in that desire, you know, to create, and art plays a really important role, you know, in architecture. I think anytime that you can incorporate, you know, and work with local artists, you know, certainly
Yeah.
are an ideal, yeah, to
Yeah.
incorporate their work into your space.
Well, I
Um,
mean, one thing artists can never stop doing is they can never stop working on their work. And they always say creative work is never completed, it's abandoned. So, but for you, what is that point? Where do you draw the line? Where do you have to say, okay, well, it's enough refining? When do we have to start protecting the schedule and the approvals?
and the budget is a big one. Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
want scope creep, but it's easy for me. I'm very pragmatic. You know, I know that I need to get from point A, you know, to point D, and you know, my mind works in a way that segments it. I know where, you know, the steps I need to take in between and what those milestones need to be. So, you know, for every project, we're going to develop a project schedule and strive to stick with that, because it's going to affect the client negatively if you don't. It's going to affect their budget. It's going to affect their timing. You know, they need to get certain, it's incredibly important, you know, for them to be able to complete their projects within whatever time frame they have. It might be driven by grants and grant money, you know, that they're going to
Yep.
lose if they don't get the project done in time.
Hmm.
Um, and a project we just completed, the fastest project I've ever done, is a pediatric cath lab equipment replacement. Super important to minimize downtime on that project. So sometimes you need to sort of seed, you know, just your desires to, in your mind, you think that you're going to improve the final product before you get it out to bid, but you need to be able to balance that. And being able to teach other people to do it is sometimes a challenge, you know, that
Sure.
desire to want to continue making improvements, but you really need to be aware
Oh,
of
for me, I feel like I'm always on the edge, It's like, because, when you're the boss, it's like nobody else is going to tell you, hey, you better be conservative here, keep your eye on the prize or whatever, Um,
our clients and the work that we do for our clients, yeah, would help drive that. And I think that that's the importance of understanding the entire, you know, what drives an entire project. Your clients' requirements, budgetary concerns. What are they considering when they're doing it? You want to do something really spectacular. Well, they may need to do it, you know, within a very limited budget. You need to understand that, and you need to come up with a creative solution, you know, to address it so everybody's happy and you don't feel like
sure.
you've created something, yeah, it's not,
Yeah.
yeah, less than optimal.
So well, let's talk about let's talk about your work in detail a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about this project at Greenwich Village Hospital. So tell me about tell me a little bit about it's in the St. Vincent's neighborhood in New York. Tell me a little bit about the area and what's going on in the community there, and how you came into it.
Yeah, so the West Village of New York City. The West Village, actually, when I first moved here, I lived in the neighborhood, so I was very familiar with it. Spent some time down there. A big LGBTQ community, that's in that area. I used to attend the church, actually, that was across the street from this facility.
Oh, the St. Vincent's is where Stonewall, the Stonewall bar is, right? Is that
sort
right?
of. That's a little further down 7th Avenue, correct? But it's in 7th Avenue and 13th Street, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and they have a memorial, an AIDS memorial, actually, a park right adjacent. So
Right.
I was familiar with that community. I had been to St. Vincent's Hospital. I had actually been, to see a physician in the outpatient facility St. Vincent's had at this facility that Northwell took over. So it was a real loss when St. Vincent's closed. It was a real loss to the community. And there are other facilities similar on the east side that closed, and it's always a loss to the community, people who rely on the services that are easily available. So Northwell put in a standalone emergency department in that building, and the balance of the floors above it were outpatient business occupancies. But they realized that they really, in their initial intent, was always to reintroduce a cardiac cath facility, to put back there.
Okay.
And we got involved very early on. It was going to be outpatient, but as we moved along, we realized it had to have an inpatient component, that was attached to it. So we were tasked with creating a new inpatient I2 occupancy within what is essentially an outpatient business occupancy facility. So that was a major challenge as far as trying to figure out how we were going to get all the proper separations between the two uses, because the business uses that were on the floor weren't going to go away. So that was one challenge, obviously. We were able to do it. They went through a number of different, iterations of the plans, kept changing. This is one of the things that, you need to realize when you work in healthcare. When you usually start it may not always continue along a straight path. There's going to be a lot of curves. You need to be able to, you need to be able to pivot often. But we were able to see it through. We created an inpatient unit for the cardiac cath patients. And we drew on the building's history. So the building itself is landmarked, and it was originally the Maritime Union building. It was created by an architect who, it was a challenging structure, the way it was designed.
Well, this is the building with all the portals.
All the portholes. That's why.
Oh, I love this building. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And there's just even a nightclub in the basement that I.
Was there? That one I wasn't aware of, but so we worked within it. We didn't modify the exterior of the building. It didn't, we didn't affect that. But you had to get.
I love this building. I always love looking at this building. It's cool.
They rejuvenated it. It's great. They reintroduced an inpatient component to this community, that had lost that service, and we were able to introduce artwork that spoke specifically, toward the history of it. And we worked with an art vendor. We went through the selection process with the administration, the clinicians. And this was like a clinician component that didn't exist down here because they didn't have the department, or the staff established. So we were really designing this without a full guidance of the clinical
It
staff.
does have a nautical feel to it that's very calming and relaxing, actually.
And we pulled that into the interiors. And one of the things that I think
Yeah.
we pride ourselves at in Twine is, it's just sort of like that sense of serenity. You
Yeah.
really want to give the people, if you're coming in and walking through one of the facilities, and the same was true with the Sandra Atlas Bass otolaryngology outpatient facility, you just want to create a calming attitude. And it's not just the finishes that you select, but it's also the way that the facility functions in the flow. You want to make the wayfinding easy for somebody. You want to reduce the stress, that they might be feeling when they go
Yes.
into this type of,
Yep.
space.
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, you can feel the flow even in these kind of signatures, like the main desk has a sort of wave motif, and it definitely, you feel like you're definitely in professional hands at this place.
mhm.
I don't know how to explain it, but it's you definitely I would feel like I was getting really good care if I went to this place. I would say.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I had to sit back and think about that. And again, I think it's just a reduction in stress, and everybody's trying to make improvements at the facility. So, if you do, pre-check-in, so you don't have to worry about finding the right, uh, reception area that you're supposed to go to first, where they're going to direct you to the proper floor. You just want to try to make that as seamless as possible. And, that's why medical planning is an extremely important component. So,
Right.
I could talk about that too in the mother-baby unit that we had done out on Long Island. That project, there was a postpartum unit that was separated from the nursery. And it was separated by a public corridor with a back entrance. Every time they transported the babies, they had to do lockdown, right? So they could transport it across this public corridor and into the postpartum unit. It was very inconvenient. They were trying to convert to a rooming in, situation. That's where the medical planning was really important. Many times we have challenging floor plates that we're working with,
Right.
In this case, the building was triangular. It didn't give you a big space to be able to put a central nursery into the middle of it. So, the work that we do really starts at the programming and planning stage. That's where your creativity is going to start. And if you come up with a good plan, a really clean, well-organized, plan that gives you something to work through and helps you, create a final product that's going to give you that sense.
Tell me more about this kind of micro choreography that happens here when you've got. So these are isolation rooms for infants. Is that right?
Are you talking? And then I have to say,
or I'm sorry, maybe I'm confusing projects.
that might be actually for a bone marrow transplant project that we did, that we converted. We converted isolation rooms into new, and that again is another challenging use. And I'm not certain if that's the project that you're referring to, but
well, I just it's I think when you're well, tell me about that process, because it's once again it's about the floor plan, right? And you're having to deal with the door swing and the toilet pairing and the ante room and all these little things, right? So just tell me about like what your thought process as far as like the human experience in either one of these situations, and
yeah, that can actually go back, starting with the mother baby unit that we married, the two units together, and also for probably every project that they have challenging conditions. For the bone marrow transplant, it's a positive a PE room, positive air pressure environment. And you need to be cognizant of all these, from the very beginning. If you understand what environment you're designing to, that certainly is going to inform you about how the overall unit should work. And when you're planning in 2D, which is medical planning, where you're sort of doing test fits and you're trying to fit all these spaces together. And in New York, you never ever have enough space.
Yeah.
So you're always going to try to be fitting, as you were alluding to these ante rooms and things like that. You might not have the floor space for it. The codes don't necessarily require it, but you need to understand then, what are your options as far as maintaining the air pressures if you don't have that buffer in between? How can you address it, in a creative way, so you don't compromise the function of the space, and you're not gonna need to worry about not getting it approved, through the health, the Department of Health, who's going to be looking at stuff like that. But as you're going through that planning process, you really need to try to understand, and I keep saying the whole picture, because it's not just two-dimensional. I mean, at that point, you need to start imagining yourself how you're going to walk through the space and what opportunities you have to introduce, say, higher ceiling heights, visual focal points. What is it going to look like when somebody walks into the space? Is it going to have an open space to greet you, and then you're going to see you're going to know immediately that you need to go to that receptionist at the nurse station. You're not going to be left looking around, wondering what you're supposed to, do.
So Pamela, how do you guys go about modeling spaces and documenting existing spaces? What's your process for that?
Yeah, so right now we don't use 3D technology, although some of our consultants do. In fact, today I was on site for another project, and they were using a 3D scanning system for a mechanical room that we were taking a look at, and then they'll share that information to us. But we still do a lot of on-site survey work ourselves, and we use Revit. So
you do. So you are working in BIM, right?
Yes,
but
yeah. So we'll create a 3D space there, and that gives us an opportunity actually to do, to inform ourselves as we're building the model,
right,
to be able to pull 3D from that.
Yeah. Well, it seems like a lot of these things you're actually really working in very confined, smaller precision spaces. So, I mean, it makes sense for you to sort of be on site and understand the space really well.
It's a requirement. The clients will always stress that the AE team needs to go out and do site verification. You can't depend on existing documentation. You need to see what the condition of the space is, and you need to
of course. Yeah.
understand how the people who utilize it work. Yeah.
So let's say you build in Revit, and then let's say if you need to coordinate documents with a lot of other consultants and vendors and other tradespeople, how do you what do you typically have to do? You output CAD for them, or do they want other things, or?
It depends if they're working in. A lot of engineers don't automatically, our engineering consultants don't necessarily work in Revit, without charging an additional fee. I think it's because they probably have specific draftsmen that they utilize. For us, everybody in our office does production. So everybody in our office knows how to utilize Revit. And so we'll upload the Revit model right to 360, I guess, BIM 360. Or we'll export it to AutoCAD. If we have a consultant who's not working in Revit, then we'll export it to AutoCAD, and they'll work off AutoCAD. And then we'll do our coordination that way. Some of the vendors, the equipment vendors that we do work with, don't have, unfortunately, they don't use BIM, or they don't use Revit. Which is really unfortunate, because there's some really complex equipment like cardiac cath labs, biplane systems.
Yeah, I could imagine trying to explain this sort of stuff to people in 2D would be very confusing.
And they do have 3D programs, but they don't communicate. So that's an issue that we've run across. And it'd be really nice for us to be able to input their 3D models directly into ours, but it's often not the case. Yeah.
Not surprising.
Yeah, it is.
Well, anyway, speaking of which, just another shout out to our sponsor, Plan. And if your work is in existing buildings, clean capture matters. And so we document what's there and we align it to clear level of detail, level of accuracy, and deliver models you can defend it in front of your clients. So if it's how you move from, as you said, moving from maybe to approved, without losing the soul of the plan. So, so Pamela, tell me about, let's talk more about this Huntington Mothers and Babies project. When did you realize the nursery needed to live inside the postpartum? And then how did that diagram cut risk and still feel serene?
Yeah, we had to do, reorganization in a larger footprint because of the way that public corridor cut through the space. We were able to do it. Like I said, it was a challenge. It was a triangular floor plan. It doesn't give you an optimal, we had to incorporate a NICU portion into that, neonatal intensive care, and just a normal nursery. But they were moving toward what they call a rooming in program. So they originally had to pay 2 bedded rooms that they converted into single bedded rooms so that we'd be able to fit a bassinet within that floor, right? Space. And the idea is that you'd be able to reduce the size of the nursery. Unfortunately, at the time, the codes didn't really allow you to eliminate the normal nursery because, I'm sorry, I probably should use normal, the newborn nursery because they still, if the mother wanted some respite, they would have to be able to bring the baby back. But it eliminated having to cross that public corridor. So they didn't have to worry about the lockdown. You had distinct entrances into the combined space. And then they took that public entrance and made it an entrance specifically for the mother-baby unit. So we no longer had people coming into the hospital from that direction. The only people coming in there were coming in for either labor and delivery or to visit postpartum. And that helps. Yeah, that helps solve the problem. And we were able to incorporate all the support spaces. So it was a contiguous floor plan and you no longer had to worry about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so that's, I mean, I can't imagine like a more emotionally charged room. It's probably the most emotionally charged room in the world, right? The room where someone first meets their baby, right? What are some of the cues that you think about in terms of lighting and sound, and what you can do for that room?
There's multiple levels of lighting that are required, and it requires coordination, with neutron systems and things like that. It's a challenge. It almost always ends up with bugs in it that need to be worked out. There's the lighting that's required, for cleaning. There's lighting required for exam, but then you want to provide some low level lighting. You want to give them the ability to dim.
Right.
You want to be able to provide lighting that's not going to, it's not going to affect, the infant sleep or the mother's sleep in that aspect. You also need to accommodate sleep sofas for family members as well. So, so there's also going to there's that aspect of being able to provide lighting that could be utilized by, the family space. It's not going to disrupt, the patient when they're resting. So yeah, there's a lot of thought that needs to go into that. And and it's an essential, component, to think about while you're doing the design. And that's true for every patient room. It's not just the mother baby, but that would be true for the Greenwich Village Hospital project as well. We spent a lot of time coordinating the different lighting scenes, that they were able to pull up, and in addition to that, there's always the blinds at the window. You want them to be able to, control the blinds from the bed, the shades. It's a whole aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like you're sort of providing some leadership in these kind of rooms where design, budget, and emotion are colliding. And what kind of leader are you? What kind of leadership do you feel like you're providing for? You've got, these healthcare rooms, a lot of rooms focused on women's health.
Just to sort of go back on that, we rely a lot also on the facility architects, and the project managers. They work, in the system, and they know what they're doing throughout, throughout the system at not just the facility that we're doing work in, but the other facilities that they have, within the region. We rely a lot on them, on their, past experience, and what their initiatives are.
Right.
And they hold a lot of knowledge, in regards to the requirements for lighting and things. And of course, they know what finishes are pre-approved, what the maintenance implications are, what the costs are for all of this. And so they're a tremendous, resource. But we work, with them to help give them guidance, because, we want to be able to be a resource, to know what the latest trends are that are coming out in healthcare, what the newest materials are that are available, that work, within that type of facility.
I mean, it's nice to think that there might be some kind of a balance, because of course, there's a lot of compliance issues and safety issues in hospitals. But at the same time, I mean, as a patient, I mean, often it's a miserable experience. Like being, I broke my ankle and I was on a stretcher, like, lying on my back, and I had to look up at the ceiling for 12 hours, and just all these super bright lights shining in my face all the time. And it's hard to find. Sometimes it can be hard to find a place to relax in a hospital.
That's what that's our challenge. The point is to try to make sure that that's not the kind of experience you have,
We actually worked on a project with one of our partners. I think it was, I don't want to misquote it, but we worked on a project that was about, during the pandemic, they were trying to create more contemplative spaces for people to chill out, because, as everybody was really burning out at that time, especially in hospitals. And so this was, they were trying to just give more like relaxing contemplative rooms within the hospital, so that people could, live inside of that silo their whole lives and still, be able to regulate.
For the staff, it's really important to give them places where they can get some respite. And for the Greenwich Village Hospital, we were able, there was a wonderful space in the corner of the floor plan that looked out on Freedom Tower. It actually looks downtown. And, we talked about putting the patient room in that location. And again, the project architect, for the facility really wanted to just discourage us from doing something like that. So we ended up creating a multi-purpose room specifically for the staff. And that gives them a place that they can go, and we provide some lounge seating, some hoteling, work spaces, the ability to create a conference area for them. And so I think that functions in addition to their regular staff lounge. So they also have a staff lounge where they can go, but there's this place, that is separated, but within the unit. So they're still close by. And I think that that's one of the elements that really need to be, considered, because you can't forget, the people, who work there. And at the same time, you also want to try to provide areas for the families who come visit. So if they want to step away from a stressful situation, they have their own family, waiting area, a little coffee station that they'd be able to go to you know,
Right.
some a nice quiet space that they could also try to get some work done.
Right.
You know, and you know, the hope is as we keep, you know, working on these facilities and updating them, that we're going to learn, you know, better means and better methods and better design choices. Again, I think that having a really clean, organized space makes it wayfinding is a big issue. You know,
Yeah.
you have to make wayfinding easy, because that's going to restrict, that's going to erase one of the more stressful aspects of visiting a healthcare facility.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think with all the advancements we have now in BIM and scan to BIM and AI, and I think that that kind of stuff really shouldn't be that hard to do anymore. The As I mentioned to you, we just completed a 5.5 million square foot project that was all about the wayfinding. Essentially creating an inventory of all the different signs, but I think when you have that now and you're able to, like, certainly an AI can process all that kind of stuff and really, I think, really optimize those kind of things. I mean, they're able to, crunch really big numbers in a way that like a human mind couldn't. I mean, it seems like in your work you have to think about all kinds of factors that most architects never would even think about, right? So
yeah, think about it again. I think if you're in a different discipline, you have, you know, equally challenging issues that you need to deal with. You know, it's this is specific to healthcare because of all the regulatory agencies, you know, that we need to deal with.
Sure.
But, I wanted to go back to the AI thing though, because that's something that I've not yet. I personally have not. I find it confusing actually. So I haven't really started thinking about how architects can utilize that. I know some of my staff will utilize Chat GPT, you know, to perhaps, you know, as far as if they're writing descriptions of projects and things like that. But what type of experience do you have with AI, you know, and how do you view that moving into the future?
Oh, well, I guess it's sort of a two-part answer to your question. So in one case, I use AI in many different ways to structure my business and do strategic planning, and I'm using it for financial modeling and things like that, competitive analysis, trying to just things that I suppose any entrepreneur could use it for. And really what I found is what's important that most people don't understand about AI is that it's really not about writing a good prompt for an AI, but it's about controlling what I call the context window of what the AI has in its memory. Because what happens a lot of times when people try to do serious work, it's sort of like working with somebody who has Alzheimer's, and it just forgets the thread like halfway through, and you wind up with something that's totally useless, or it's just a big hallucination. Developing systems around creating a very rigid context window, that's kind of like the compliance of AI, basically, to make sure that it works. So I have a bunch of different strategies for that, and I think all the different models are all good at different things, and really what it takes is actually getting all the models to talk to each other to actually provide like a completely superior result, which is possible now. And then that gets beyond I think, like, in general, like an average thing is going to be 15 to 20% hallucinations. right? But you can get beyond that if you have these models all talking to each other and punching holes and being skeptical and doing their own research and whatever. You can get way beyond all that hallucinatory level and get to something that's actually incredibly pertinent. But then also in terms of the whole AE firm side of my business, I live here in Troy. There's a school here called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And they have a fantastic School of Architecture, as well as School of Engineering and Sciences, and a lot of great computer scientists. So one of the things we're working on is I guess you call it machine learning, where Scan-to-Plan has an enormous corpus of point clouds and models, right? So we've scanned and modeled thousands and thousands of buildings, and all those models are within the same standards that we use every time. So the models are like coherent from one model to the next in terms of the sort of tagging of the different geometry and what it is, right? So so what we're doing now actually is analyzing the entire corpus of work that we've done, because at the moment, what we do with Scan-to-Plan when we model in Revit is everything is entirely manual.
Right. I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
Yeah, everything is
You can't
completely.
just automatically convert the scan into a Revit model.
No, you can't. That doesn't. That magic button doesn't exist yet. So we are trying to think, well, it doesn't exist yet, and when it does, it's probably going to eat our lunch at Scan-to-Plan. So we might as well be the ones to figure out how to do it first. So we are working on that. And I'm working with my friend Dennis Sheldon, who was he was Frank Gehry's chief technology officer. So he's my partner in this project. And he just went for the Frank Gehry Memorial last week in LA. But he's also a incredible professor. He's a professor at MIT and also at RPI. And so it's a project we're doing now where we're trying to essentially figure out. So what you do is you take the point cloud, which is raw unstructured data, and then you run it through what you call segmentation, or what you call feature extraction. So it's looking through and it's trying to find all the power outlets, all the lighting fixtures, all the chairs, all the tables, all the walls, all those things, right? And then identify them all as discrete objects. And then the other thing to do then is to go through all the families in Revit and then have virtual versions of those. So you say, okay, what is the best analogy between this whole family of shapes that I have versus all these things I've just identified in this data, and then putting those shapes in the right places, essentially, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be fantastic if they could do that automatically, and I would think that that's enormous.
It's going to happen soon, and it's probably going to lead to like a massive. When it becomes super cheap, it's going to lead to a really a massive redefinition of how people are doing architecture and engineering, I think. Because hospitals will just give you a digital twin. They'll have one. They'll be like, oh, here's a digital twin of the whole hospital.
To rely on, right now, you can't rely on any of the documentation they have. But if you, it creates something through that process and it becomes reliable, that changes, things a lot.
Well, we want to be able to document entire campuses, hospitals. The thing is like there's, I've found, and what we're doing is there's sort of a ceiling as far as like how big of a project somebody wants to do. But I want to make it so that massive campuses, massive hospital, medical campuses, all these things, are all
universe-based. Yeah.
relatively easy to do and relatively, you know, the thing is, what unlocks the next step beyond this is what you call physical AI. So that's when you have like robots in the hospital, droids, whatever, that are doing all these tasks that are not only maintaining the building, but they're maintaining the hospital, the equipment in the hospital. And basically the hospital becomes like a self-driving car, right? Where it is autonomous, it's predictive, it's fixing itself. And what we need to enable that is kind of the next step beyond BIM, which is intelligent building systems. And to have intelligent building systems, you need to have a semantic layer for building spaces, if that makes sense. So the reason an LLM like ChatGPT works so well is that it has a semantic layer for understanding language. So it can break down language and reconstruct it any way it wants to. So the building systems are actually much simpler than language. They're far more regular and predictable because they follow all the laws of gravity, right? Or all the laws of physics. And so if we can build the semantic layer, then, and that becomes an open standard across all buildings, like intelligent space in all buildings, in all hospitals, and all hotels, etc., then it's this kind of thing where, you know, you'll be able to, like, let's say, bring a robot into your house, and instead of it like bumping into the walls and smashing into everything for the first day, it's actually going to know where everything is. So just be able to walk through the door, walk over, start washing your dishes, whatever, you know, because it has a model of the building and it's
already. So it doesn't have to learn it like your Robo-Rock that goes around to trace.
Exactly. You know, but I mean, imagine you go to Walmart and you buy a robot and you just set it loose in the hospital and it knows where everything is already.
Yeah, it's a whole, you know, and that's what I feel like I need to work out is like, you know, where does this go and what does it do, you know, to my profession in particular, you know, to architecture.
Well, I do think the physical AI thing is really key, but what hasn't been solved and what Dennis and I are talking about is what is this semantic layer for building systems that enables physical AI? Because right now, physical AI is just words and pictures and stuff.
Right.
Not actually, it's not actually able to get in there and help with any of the stuff that's happening in the hospital physically, you know? So
yeah, but you know, it's sort of important, you know, you can't really lose humanity, you know, either. So it's like, especially in a hospital setting, it's great to have a lot of things automated, but you still need, you know, the human touch, and you still need, you know, the connection. You still need the caretakers.
Oh, I mean, I'm not talking about robots becoming nurses. It's more about robots that are maintaining the building, doing the facility management, changing the light bulbs, you know, those kind of things, you know. It's also becomes interesting too when buildings have their own intelligences. Think about this. And then the buildings can start talking to each other because they have their own supervising intelligence that you know, in the future, you know, maybe buildings can be trading energy with each other, or
it's a very good, you know, point, because a project is when you're in a hospital and you've got multiple buildings that have been built over time. They do need to be integrated, right? And so that, you know, that idea.
Right. So imagine that each of those buildings has a digital twin and they have a supervising intelligence, and those intelligences can talk to each other and figure out how does this building support this other building better,
and how to transfer the power of the energy, or, you know, the heat, and a lot of that's done through the physical plant right now. But yeah, that sort of ties in. I could see that.
Yeah. So anyway, That's my it's my story. You gotta watch out when you start asking me questions.
That's okay. I just wanted to end though, that if I could, I just wanted to make it, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and it has to do with mentorship. And I think that one of the things I did not appreciate as I was coming up through the profession is the need to have mentors, and it's just not, it's like not being willing to teach the younger generation coming up through the profession, but for those younger people to be open to accepting, the guidance of somebody who has gone through it. And yeah, I think that as I sort of continue through this, and that goes back to like building a practice. It's just to have that, understanding of how important it is, to sort of, to be there or be present, for helping some of the younger generation work through some of the issues that they might be having, and help them make decisions as far as, their process, of where they want to be. And I just sort of wanted to touch base on that because I have been thinking about it a lot. It's important. I have a young.
I mean, I've been talking to a lot of professors, architecture professors, through this podcast and other friends of mine and stuff, and they're in a place where it is sort of hard for them to even know what to teach at this point. What skills are they going to be teaching that are still going to be applicable in 30 years?
Exactly. And I have a young employee who doesn't work for me anymore, but he just contacted me because he actually wants to go out on his own. And it is so rare, to find a younger, just got licensed, to find a younger professional who's interested in taking that step in entrepreneurship, because it's much less likely for the younger generation to want to do it. So I realize.
Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, I find that to be true. I think, it's a challenge. Running your own business is a challenge, and it's not.
It's funny. I'm in the world of startups, and a lot of the investors they wind up investing in people my age. It used to be that they always invested in like a 25-year-old kid who was eating ramen noodles, right?
Yeah.
But they're not finding that many in this generation that actually want to go out and take that risk.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they have to go back to the OGs.
It's sort of like, I want to say, are you sure you want to do this? But I did it. I don't regret it. I'm still doing it. And hey, that's great. I think that, being a person who can encourage and offer guidance to them, based, and I know it's going to be different. It's going to be different because, the profession is changing. And
I mean, to me, I find it bewildering because I feel as if it's never been easier to have your own business, to have that we have all these incredible resources at our fingertips, the internet and AI and all these things, and then it empowers anyone to do really anything they want to do. So I find it surprising that people are, in some ways, like less enterprising than they used to be.
You have to have the client base, a lot of it is you have to have the business, or you have
all about getting a sale at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all right, well, what do you, or is there anything you're doing to sort of like foster mentorship, or are there mentors that you continue to seek out at this stage in your career?
I think, for me, if I'm involved in women in healthcare, it's a professional organization that's meant, to provide education, support, and mentorship to women in all aspects of the healthcare field. It's not just architecture, engineering, it's not just the AEC community. It should also be clinicians, or anybody, who caters to healthcare. But since such a big component, of their mission is to provide guidance and mentorship. So I've really been thinking, that's why I've been thinking a lot about it lately. And for me, I realize that I'm starting to learn from what the younger generation who have actively sought out mentors. That varies from the generation I grew up in. My mentors would have probably been male. There weren't a lot of female architects. There's some really great, female architects who've built incredible careers, but it's, sort of less likely. And I like to see, the younger women in particular, they understand the importance, of that relationship, where they've sought out career coaching and stuff like that never really occurred to me. So I'm appreciating, sort of in reverse what I can learn, from them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
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 So it's just sort of, it's like, open communication is extraordinarily important. So no miscommunication about the reason that somebody might be doing something. It's always best, to have that conversation to fully understand the situation and come up with the right solution.
Well, how do you bring new people into your firm? I mean, how do they tend to come in? Do you have relationships with any schools, or is it referrals, or do you look at resumes, or?
Lately, it's been, we have, used, I'm sorry, it's I want to say headhunters. We've used firms to find some of the higher level people, but especially with experience in healthcare. So finding people who have, number one, experience in healthcare can be slightly difficult, and finding people who have an interest in healthcare is really important. So we do have vendors who make recommendations, and we've gotten some really terrific interns, who we've been able to bring on board and then hire full-time after they've finished their internships. And they tend to be people who are really, interested in the healthcare environment, and that helps, bring in new ideas. And, like I said, sort of learn, what the schooling was like, for them. Because like I said, it is different than it was when I, went through my education. And that's generally, what we do is word of mouth recommendations.
So what do you think like, if you've got like a junior come in, I mean, what would you tell them about like working in a hospital, like as an organism, really? Because it's as you said, you have more than a lot of it. Seems like so much of your work it's very highly collaborative, right? With the hospital.
The team, working as a team is extremely important, and that team consists of the hospital personnel, the clinicians that you're doing the work for, your engineers, your other consultants, everybody, the contractors. Everybody needs to take responsibility and be willing to work together, like as a single organism, to provide the best outcome. And I think there's a lot of stress on that aspect today, more than I think had been talked about in the past, but that team mentality is really important to provide a successful outcome, for any project.
Well, fantastic. Well, hey, Pamela, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for all the work you do and taking us inside of it. And I can really feel where, how these small choices can really change a hard day for a nurse or a kid, or, all these people that are just constantly interacting with your spaces all the time. So thanks for bringing us inside of that a little bit. And for everyone listening, we've linked case studies and context in the show notes. And if you feel as if this conversation helped you think more clearly about, working with the hospital system, working with what already exists, please share it with your teammates. And thanks again, Pamela. So this is Practice Forward. Follow and rate the show whenever you listen. It's great to see you, Pamela. Take care. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Leon. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Have a wonderful day and keep up the good work. Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers.
Bye.